Welcome to our final review of Babylon 5 for today. Since our last one, we've skipped over quite a few because I already did them. We had the two-part story about Babylon 4 called War Without End. We had Grey 17 is Missing, which, well, can stay missing as far as I'm concerned. And far more important, And the Rock Cried Out No Hiding Place, where two important things happened. One was that Londo got revenge, or at least he thinks he did, on Lord Rifa by turning him over to Jakar and his people to meet a savage end. And the other was that Sheridan figured out what the Shadows were doing with their seemingly random attacks, driving people towards a perceived safe zone so they could massacre the refugees. And that, of course, brings us to this episode, Shadow Dancing. The episode opens with the League of Non-Aligned Worlds being addressed by Delenn for a huge mission that will strike a definitive blow against the Shadows. But there's a problem. We can't tell you what the plan is. You're just going to have to trust us on this one. Yeah, you don't want to risk tipping your hand to the Shadows, but these people are skeptical. At the same time, Delenn's like, hey, what more do we have to prove to get your trust, for crying out loud? Do we have to donate a kidney to your mom? Here, take one of Lanier's. I think he's got 4. He can spare it. While they're putting that together, Sheridan says that basically the Shadows are going to ambush those refugees, so we have to ambush the ambushers, which is not an easy thing to do unless you're waiting there for them. So he wants Ivanova and Marcus to go there in the White Star to scout the area out and report the moment that the Shadows show up. Then they can tell their own fleet to launch and have the element of surprise, the one element that Benders can't use. After the titles, the League says they'll give what they can, but she better deliver or they are screwed. So with the plan coming together, it's time for the White Star to go do its thing.
Captain, any last-minute instructions?
Aside from an old Egyptian blessing, I can't think of a thing.
May you never run out of bandages. Speaking of ancient practices, Zach and Garibaldi talk a little about Franklin being on walkabout. He's still at it. You can think of these 3 episodes as the Walkabout Trilogy. Or you could choose not to, because I don't think anyone really cares that much. After Garibaldi admits to being torn up that Franklin feels he has to wander the station rather than being able to help the guy out personally, we catch up with the good doctor, who is currently sleeping on the streets. While he's there, some stuck-up lady is complaining about their trip through B5 being with the Great Unwashed, the result of their revolution against Earth, she presumes, because she quotes Clark's redefined meaning of homelessness to prove how much better it is back home, where they can just call the homeless useless nuts. She also freaks when she catches the kid playing around with Dr. Franklin. Wow, what a bitch. I can't imagine a vapid and hateful society that Clark's administration has created that would immediately assume that anyone near a child is a monster. On the White Star, more low-yield flirting between Ivanova and Marcus when their shift change comes. He offers to teach her Minbari.
Nuzin Falani and Alice Midron.
I can absolutely see that being one of the things Marcus would learn to say, right alongside, "Is your husband gone?" and "I have a 12-inch ding-dong." Back on B5, Delenn gives Sheridan the news about the ships, although he's unhappy that they're not giving enough, and that Delenn is going into the danger with him, and that no one will return his calls about bring him back alive, the adventure continues. But Delenn tells him,
"We're in this together. And afterward, when we're finished with this, we will spend the night together."
Well, kind of took the spontaneity out of that, but I'm willing to let that slide this time.
You see, when Minbari become close, as we have become close, it is tradition that they spend 3 nights together. The male sleeps, and the female watches.
So you discover a person by watching them snoring, farting, and scratching themselves, and you don't even get the fun of boning them first. Meanwhile...
Get away from me!
Yes, I should definitely keep going in that direction. Franklin eventually heads to the source of it and decides to play Good Samaritan, for which it looks like he's going to get a beating. But looks can be deceiving. Turns out it's going to be a stabbing instead. This guy runs off cackling while his partner is annoyed that he has raised this from just roughing someone up to possible murder. Yeah, we all have that one difficult coworker, don't we? And the guy getting beat up won't help either. As someone selling drugs, he'd get picked up if he reported Franklin regardless, so good doctor's on his own, bleeding out and down below and screaming for someone, anyone, to please come. Well, not anyone. Don't send the guy with a knife back, please. Back on the White Star, Marcus calls Ivanova up with bad news. Seems that the Shadows didn't become an ancient force of destruction by being stupid. They're sending in a scout ship to make sure it's safe for them to blow the piss out of those refugees. So, the White Star is stuck. It can't power up the engines without being seen, but without a course correction, it just drifts right into the view of the scout ship and is seen anyway. Looks like this has just turned into a fight, but I put my money on the ship that took out a full-size shadow vessel over this little scout ship here. You're punching above your weight there, little guy. Meanwhile, Sheridan is on Delen's ship, getting ready for the big moment. In a special room to see it all. We'd seen something familiar, or at least I'm pretty sure that this is what it was, in a flashback scene about the Battle of the Line, where Delen wound up choosing Sinclair as the one to take aboard. I'm almost certain that this was the same setup going on. Well, the timing is good. The White Star took out the scout ship, but was severely damaged in the process, just in time for the Shadow Fleet to arrive. They can't jump away, but Ivanova decides to send the signal anyway and let the chips fall where they may. Probably right on their heads the way the day's been going. Back on the station, Franklin is dying, but one good thing has finally happened. He's found himself, sitting there being all sarcastic at him for stupidly insisting on being the hero.
You know what your problem is?
You're going to have to narrow it down. He argues that Franklin's life has been one long series of running away from things whenever they got tough. It's even what he's been doing right now. I mean, going on walking about, not lying on the floor bleeding to death.
You had a good job. People who cared about you, and you messed it up. I have to leave before they fire me. I have to go find myself. What a bunch of mealy-mouthed, self-indulgent foundationist crap!
Hell may be other people, but it's got nothing on yourself. Well, the White Star's been spotted by the Shadows, but luckily the cavalry's riding over the hill. They've got telepaths, per our successful mission last time, but the Shadows are trying to compensate with other ships serving as a buffer to protect the big ships from the telepaths, so this is going to require some strategy. Luckily, though, Sheridan is in the war room brought to you by IMAX in order to conduct the battle personally. During that, another fight is taking place, Franklin's fight to stay alive, even as his other self chides him the whole time. Until Franklin starts working to climb his way out, then his other self starts encouraging him on, because finally he's taken action. He's trying to face the hard thing rather than taking the easy path of least resistance.
And get up off the damn floor. I don't care how much it hurts. Don't you go passing out on me, because that's just another kind of running away.
There's some tough love there. The old trope about passing out at the sight of blood or of trauma, that is actually a thing. It's kind of a weird safety system that might sometimes malfunction. It's the same reason that you'll turn pale in those kinds of situations. It's decreased blood pressure, because when you're in a situation like Franklin is in, where you're punctured and bleeding, dropping the blood pressure so you don't pump all the blood out of your body and die is actually a good idea. Exerting himself like this risks increasing the pressure, of course, and losing more blood, but clearly it's the only way that he's going to survive, finding help rather than waiting for it to come to him. If he were to fight, he might die, but if he didn't fight, then he'd definitely die. I know I'm not saying a whole lot, it's just when we get to episodes like this where there's lots of combat, I've got very little I can actually say, and it's the third one of the day. I don't want to seem like I'm coasting through it, so this is what you wind up with. Review via filibuster. So yeah, while he stumbles out into a crowd to get help, the big money of the season gets spent on the ships blowing the snot out of each other. Eventually, the Shadows are driven off in defeat, but there are lots of casualties. Franklin is going to be fighting for a bed right now. The end result assessment for the battle is... on the one hand, we lost 2 ships for every one of theirs, and with the element of surprise on our side. On the other hand, though, we did win the fight, and let's not kid ourselves here, this was against the forces of ultimate darkness. Take the win. If the U.S. military faced Beelzebub and the hordes of hell, and they weren't the ones to run away, I'd call it a victory. Garibaldi's there when Franklin finally comes to, and Franklin has to grudgingly admit that what he found wasn't what he wanted, but it probably was what he needed, which was a verbal ass-kicking. But the bigger ass-kicking may be coming. Sheridan discusses the problem with this incident with Ivanova and Delenn. Up until now, B5 struck from hiding, but this time they definitely tipped their hand and they made the Shadows pay big. But Ivanova thinks that they have been disinclined to attack Babylon 5 for some other reason, and not just because they've got a voyeuristic hologram living on the planet below. Considering this, Sheridan brings up the images that Kosh had sent him that one time, with Ivanova and the Raven asking, "Do you know who I am?" And Garibaldi with the dove, "The man in between is searching for you." And finally Ivanova saying, "You are the hand." From this, they conclude that there's probably some equal and opposite person to Sheridan, assuming that it means anything. Ivanova dreamt that she went to work naked, and we didn't get to see that happen. Damn it. Well, Dr. Franklin may not be up to snuff, but he's helping coordinate with the med lab personnel to deal with all the casualties, and talks with Sheridan about their situation. Everyone's been calling it a leave of absence, expecting him to just come back when this is all over, but Sheridan offers it, and Franklin agrees officially to say that he's going to come back. He's going to do better, not more, he says, which is a good lesson. I hope you all learned the importance of that from the 3 videos that we watched today, plus the remastered episode of Voyager. It's not about volume, people. So it's time for Sheridan to go to bed so that Delenn can watch him sleep. Hashtag everyday sexism. Why is it that it's sexy when a woman does that, but when I do it through a telescope, suddenly it's wrong? During this last portion of the episode, we've been seeing some ship come from a shadow vessel, and then a POV of someone coming through the station. And it turns out to be...
I'm Anna Sheridan, John's wife.
I'm calling Shadow Dancing a must-see, since this sets up the next episode, and that episode is one of the most important in the show. I give it a stamp of recommended. I like the double meaning of the title, obviously referring to both the shadows, but also describing Franklin's confrontation with himself. Like I said before, this is the money episode, the big battle between both sides by the series standards anyway. Also, by placing the big conflict here, it leaves room for the personal conflict in the final episode of the season. In other words, there's a big confrontation, but it's not the climax of the season. The trio of episodes that we have seen today shows that the Shadows can be defeated, but we've also seen that this fact does not diminish their threat. Heavy prices have been paid with both their ships and personnel, as with the loss of their greatest Vorlon ally. It's forward progress, but just the beginning of what will be a difficult road for all of them. The incident with the rebellion from Earth changed the game, and the death of Kosh changed it still further. Yes, he wasn't involved very often, but they were the moments that counted. They were the ones that allowed many of the characters to make the changes that they needed in order to be able to face the challenges that would come, and to be capable of overcoming them. Combine this with the Shadow incident, and it's clear that Season 3 is closing the door on what Babylon 5 was to evolve into something new. We'll see what that is in our next episode, the long-awaited Zahadum.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Finally.
Ivanova to the bridge.